Thank you very much. My name is Enki Harkonen. I'm a Greenpeace energy campaigner based in Helsinki. The main part of my presentation, which is not yet on the screen, so if you can. Alright, so the main part of my presentation will concentrate on the process with which Finland decided to go for nuclear new build in the early 2000s, the promises that were made related to it, and how well they have performed in time. Then if I have more time, I will also talk a little bit about the additional problems that the new nuclear power plants will bring, based on the experiences in Finland, and also on the final disposal of the nuclear waste. But I will start with the question how Finland became the leader of the nuclear renaissance in Europe. Because as you know, after the Chernobyl accident, the nuclear new build pretty much stalled in the whole of the world, but especially in the Western Europe. Only France finished a couple of nuclear power plants along with the UK, but in other parts no new projects were initiated. In Finland, the Chernobyl resulted in a change of political process. Before that, nuclear companies could just apply directly a permission from the Finnish government, and it was a very technical process, so they just took a look into the papers to see if it was a feasible plan, and then decided to accept it or not. And after Chernobyl, it was decided to make it into a political decision. So the power to give the final approval for a nuclear power plant was transferred from the government to the parliament. This did not at first hinder the nuclear industry. They still applied for a new license for a power plant in 1993, but the parliament decided to vote that down. And that was the end of the nuclear age in Finland for a while. However, nuclear companies decided to not give up, and they started a massive lobbying effort that went through all levels of society. So they were not only lobbying the politicians, but also representatives of media, editors-in-chief, also labor unions, all kinds of stakeholders. So what happened was that nuclear power came back to the agenda in the late 90s with the proposal to build Olkiluoto 3, so the third nuclear power plant in Olkiluoto, Finland. There is the speciality about this decision-making process in Finland is that as I said earlier, the parliament nowadays has the final say on nuclear projects, and there are traditionally no party lines. So each individual member of the parliament can decide her or his position by himself. And this has actually been the case. So all the conservative politicians are always voting yes, and the Greens are always voting no, but otherwise all the parties have been splitting. And this has been the reason for the extensive lobbying, because you can never know, you cannot judge based on the party positions if you are going to achieve the necessary votes or not. So in 2002, the Olkiluoto 3 Commission was again voted for the second time, and this time it was approved. The approval was based on some very impressive figures which were provided by the nuclear industry and the nuclear lobbyists. Here are some of them. The rationality behind the decision and why the parliament in the end decided to adopt it with a very, very small majority though, was that they considered that there was no possibility to achieve such a good and cheap electricity production without taking the risk of nuclear power. So they saw that there is no alternative for this path. And this was also, after the decision was taken, this was also carried on to the mainstream media and to the people, and the acceptability of nuclear power rose sharply after the decision for a short while. However, it has been coming down, and I will show you the reason for it. The problem with this all good promises was that none of them was actually kept. This is the Olkiluoto 3 power plant at its pretty current stage. So originally it was estimated that the power plant would cost 2.5 billion euros, which is a pretty cheap price for such a huge production utility. However, at the moment the price is at 6.6 billion euros, and that no longer has any profit margin for the building company. So the pure price of production would be 6.6 billion. If there would be a similar project in some other countries, it would most probably be at around 7.5 or even 8.5 billion euros, since of course the company would also like to make some profit with it. Also, the original estimate of the building time was 4 years, so it was supposed to, the building was started in 2005 and it was supposed to be finished by 2009. However, it still is not finished. According to the most recent estimations, it should be finished by 2014, but that still remains to be seen. However, it's anyway, the building time has anyway already been doubled by now. We can also look at the situation as a graph. So there is almost a linear rise in both the building time and the cost compared to the original estimations. And as it is still at least three years from being completed, we have to see if even this estimation will provide correct. Then a little bit about the effect on the electricity prices. One of the main reasons to build the nuclear power plant was that it was supposed to provide cheap electricity. Now at the current price we know that it's not going to be much cheaper than electricity provided by, for example, wind energy, wind power. But the problem is also that as all the companies that have invested on Olkiluoto 3 have not invested in something else, the growth of energy production has stalled in Finland, and that has also led to a rise in electricity prices. What is the exact amount of this rise? It's really hard to estimate. The only figure that we have is pretty old. It's from 2007, when the Union of Big Electricity Consumers estimated that it would cost 3 billion euros for the Finnish economy. That only this delay, that would make around 600 euros per Finnish person. Now let's look at who is going to pay the bill for this. The original claim, and the claim that the nuclear industry still often makes, is that nuclear is being built by private money. However, that has not been the case in any country in the world ever, and that's also not the case with Olkiluoto 3. Olkiluoto 3 managed to secure a very cheap loan, but that was only because it was guaranteed by the French export agency COFAS, and also for some reason the Swedish export credit agency. Now that the price has gone so much over what was originally estimated, it's a little bit unclear who is going to pay for that. Originally, the contract was a so-called turnkey contract. So Areva, the building company of the nuclear power plant, was supposed to cover all if the price would be more than was originally estimated, it was supposed to be covered by Areva. However, Areva has now sued TVO, and they are involved in a court battle where Areva is claiming almost 2 billion from TVO, which, by the way, would bring TVO to bankruptcy since it does not have such money. And TVO is claiming 1.4 billion because of the delay of the project. Then also ERVA has had to be recapitalized to carry the extra costs, and this has happened through money from the French and the Kuwaiti taxpayers. If we look at the effect on the employment, apart from how it's going to affect the competitiveness of the Finnish industries, heavy industries who are going to use the electricity if it's ever finished, it was also supposed to offer at least half of the jobs in building to the Finnish workers. At the moment, the situation is that 23% of the workforce is domestic in Finland. The rest come from Eastern Europe and also outside of the Europe, because the construction companies are trying to keep the costs as low as possible. 25% of the investments have remained in Finland. Olkiluoto 3 was also supposed to be the main measure to achieve the Kyoto targets in Finland. At the moment, it seems that Finland is going to achieve the Kyoto targets because so many paper companies or paper factories have been closed down and moved to some other countries. But Olkiluoto 3 for sure will have no effect on it, because Olkiluoto 3 will not be finished before the Kyoto period is already ended. Also, originally it was estimated that Olkiluoto 3 might lower the Finnish carbon emissions by 10 megatons, which was based on the assumptions that it would completely replace coal power. But later studies found out that most probably it cannot lower emissions so much, because the coal power is anyway needed to produce district heating, which is what half of the Finland is using to heat its houses. So most probably this also will not be accomplished if the plant is ever started. Another thing is that as I said earlier, the investment in any other kinds of energy sources froze completely after the Olkiluoto 3 decision. Finland is a rather small country with only 5 million inhabitants, and if you put this kind of massive amount of investment in one energy sources, then there simply are no other people to invest in some other kinds of energy sources. So before 2010, when a feed-in law was finally approved for the renewables, there pretty much was no investment in anything else. Then there was also the argument of reducing reliance on Russia. That's of course hard to say when the whole facility has not been started yet. But the fact is that what the Russian imports are mainly used for is the peak load periods. So when the consumption is highest, then also the gas is also imported for combined heat and power production. Now these two are things that cannot be produced by nuclear power. There is no nuclear power in Finland has not been allowed, and also nowhere in the world has been able to produce this district heating except in some very small power plants in Russia. It also cannot be adjusted according to the Finnish safety principles, so it cannot provide different amounts of electricity in the peak load periods and normally. So it's only base load electricity, and then peak loads have to be imported or produced in some other ways. Then there is the question, why is Finland still considering 2 more nuclear power plants after this fiasco? Well, this is what the people are saying these days. Finnish Parliament decided last year to approve 2 more licenses for nuclear power plants. This happened despite the record low public acceptance number of 34% for nuclear. After the Fukushima disaster, there were new parliament elections, and the new government has written in its program that it's not going to accept any further nuclear power plants. So the expansion period is now definitely over, but it still remains to be seen if these 2 power plants that already gained permission before before this happens are going to be built or not, and that's basically up to the investors. Why do the companies still want to invest in nuclear in such a bad situation? There is a special Finnish legislation that allows any kind of energy producers to buy their energy without paying taxes for it. And that's a major market disruption that basically makes it more profitable to own any kind of energy production, even if it would be very expensive, as long as it's there, than to buy it from the markets. And as a nuclear power plant is such a big utility, it's able to provide electricity for hundreds of companies, whereas in a normal situation, there would be power companies that would build, for example, small renewable wind parks or hydro or whatever, and then sell them to the market, and then the industrial companies would buy it from the market. But this is not the case in Finland because of this legislative problem. The future of nuclear power in Finland remains quite uncertain. There are still some heavy problems with building of Olkiluoto 3. The original design for the instrumentation and control system of the power plant was not approved by the nuclear regulator, and they still have not found a way around. They have not found a new system. So it remains to be seen if it can even be completed until 2014. The other two projects don't have any kind of financing yet. They also don't have the reactor provider, so it's very unclear if they will be ever completed. They have until 2015 to come up with the solution to all these problems. And then the last final thing where I will end, because my time is finished, is that there are still huge problems with disposal of the high-level nuclear waste. Finland tends to travel around the world advertising that it has come up with a solution to disposal of high-level nuclear waste. However, that's not the case. There is a research project which is essentially a copy from the Swedish KBS3 technology, but it does not have a construction permit yet. It's only at a stage of development, and it remains to be seen if it can be ever accomplished. Thank you very much.
Dėkui pranešėjai. Na ir paskutinis kalbėtojas prieš mūsų diskusiją yra svečias iš Baltarusijos, profesorius Lepinas.